So I was once an illustrator, and I did illustrations for card games like Magic the Gathering, uh, Iron Crown Enterprises. They did the old J.R.R. Tolkien card game, and then I also did. I painted some cards for the Dune card game. As you can see here, this one was one I painted. So if you've ever been a collector of these, um, I probably painted about 20 of these here. Sometimes you'll notice I even used myself as a model for the artwork. I don't know if you can see that real well. This one was titled the Karthik Privateer. It's one of the Dune cards again. I used myself as a model for that one. Let me see if I can... Yeah, here's the original painting. The original painting that goes with the Dune card. Let's see if I can... Anyway, you get the picture. So we're going to be reviewing... sorry about that, I dropped the Dune book. We're going to be reviewing Dune, the book, the novel, today on the channel. Just so you know, I am Brian Lee Durfee. My first novel is The Forgetting Moon, published by Simon & Schuster Saga Press. The second novel is Blackest Heart. Here that is. It came out about a year ago. The third novel, Lonesome Crown, I turned into the publisher just recently, and it will be out soon. So that's the plug for my books. Now let's get into the review of Dune. Now, I will have to tell you, the first time I read this, I was pretty young and I did not care for it too much. I could tell it was well written, but I just put it away. I was too young to understand it. I was probably maybe 16 or 17 years old. But then I read it again, and I'll tell you my reaction the second time I read it. I thought it was the greatest science fiction novel I'd ever read the second time I read it, because I was older. I think I was in my last years of college or something, and I was reading the book and the whole series because of those cards that I painted. I decided I would read the book and watch the movie that came out back in the 80s just to familiarize myself with the Dune universe so I could paint those cards. And so I reread this book, and I thought it was the best science fiction book I'd ever read. And then I read the rest of them, that you can see behind me here, the Dune Messiah and the Children of Dune and the Dune Heretic, and even some of the books that were written by Frank Herbert's son and Kevin J. Anderson. I've read quite a few of those also. Now, sometimes you read a book like I did when I was younger and I didn't like it, and then you pick it up, maybe 7 or 8 years later, and you love it, and it's one of your favorite books of all time. This is in my top 10 favorite books of all time for sure. There was another book that had a similar effect on me where I first read it when it came out. I read it the day it came out, and I just wasn't that thrilled with it. I could tell it was written well, but I wasn't that into it, and that was The Name of the Wind by Pat Rothfuss. So I set it aside, and I came back to it about 5 years later, and again, I was blown away the second time I read it, and it became one of my top 10 favorite fantasy novels, The Name of the Wind. So once in a while, if you read a book at first and you don't like it, try again, and it might end up being in your top 10 books of all time, which is the case with Dune. Now, when I wanted to review this book, what I did was I read along. Well, I'm going to be honest with you. I only read along about a third of the way with the audio production that Audible put together, or the publisher, looks like Ace Books put it together. They did an Audible production of the book with, they didn't use just one voice narrator, and I thought that was a huge mistake. What they've done, and they probably did it years and years ago, is they used a cast of actors to play each part. And so what happens is they read this book on Audible like a script, a movie script, and they act out all the parts. And about a fourth of Frank Herbert's magnificent, beautiful, poetic writing is not even in the Audible narration, because the actors just act out the parts, and half of a good at least a quarter of the wording is left out. So I was reading along with the book and listening and just getting more and more frustrated because big chunks of the book were left out because they were reading it as if it was a play. And that's just in my opinion, crap. It was just crap. I hated it. So I turned it off and I just reread the book as a normal person would read a book. And so my critique of the Audible production of this thing, though I think they had good intentions in what they did, the fact that they hired a cast and had everybody play it like it was a screenplay or something, just was awful. A score out of 1 out of 10 is what I give books. The Audible version of this, I don't even want to score it. I hated everything about it. The actors were doing their best, but it was just a poor execution, a poor idea. Just have one narrator read your book and have them read every word, because that's what the people want. This is a classic novel. We want to read, we want every word read to us. We don't want a play acting production of something. So that out of the way, the book itself, I'm telling you, I'm going to give the book itself a solid 10 out of 10 stars, because Frank Herbert is a genius and this is a fantastic novel. And it should not get anything less than 10 stars by anybody that reads it. It's just super, super cool. Now, I do collect paperbacks of this. I do have the this nice hardcover that I bought. This is a beautiful book, by the way. I bought this collector's edition Dune book, and if you look, it's got these bright blue pages, which is just awesome, right? And it's got some artwork in it. It's got one of my Dune cards that I painted as a bookmark. You can't do better than that. This is just a fantastic thing. Now, the rest of the books that I have collected are the Dune paperbacks that I bought back when I was a pretty young guy. Well, I bought them when I was in college doing the Dune artwork, the illustrations. So I've got them, and then I've got a few of the Kevin J. Anderson and Frank Herbert's son books here, and I really like those. And I got to tell you, once they started, okay, let me show you something about paperbacks. Since I'm criticizing some things in the publishing world, let me show you something that I don't like about paperbacks. See, this is the size they used to make paperbacks. It's not that big. What a lot of the publishers are doing now is they're making their paperbacks slightly longer. If you can see that, they've got this. They're slightly longer and taller, and quite frankly, they just kind of screw up your collection. And so the Dune books, they started printing them in this slightly longer production, and I just stopped buying them. The Kevin J. Anderson, and the Brian Herbert books, I just stopped buying because I didn't want my collection to be all goofy looking, because I got OCD problems. If you've watched my videos, you know I got some OCD problem, and this kind of thing bothers me. No offense to John Scalzi, but I do collect his books, but they are all in the bigger format, and so as long as they're all in the bigger format, I'm okay, even though I hate it. It's just clunky, and they charge more for them. I would rather they just charge me more for the smaller paperback and keep them small like this. This is the way paperbacks are. This ain't paperback. This is some other mutation that they came up with about 10 years ago that's kind of screwed the publishing. It just screwed up publishing. End of rant. Let's get back to Dune. So one of the things that's cool, even though I stopped buying his books, Kevin J. Anderson is one of my good friends in the publishing industry. He collaborated with Brian Herbert on these the sequels and the prequels to Dune after Frank Herbert died, and they're great. And I got to meet Kevin J. Anderson. I went to his Superstars of Writing conference that he does in Colorado Springs. And if you're a beginning writer, let me say that the Superstars of Writing conference that Kevin J. Anderson puts on is it's the best conference for new writers that is out there. Kevin J. Anderson pays to have big name authors come and teach at his conference. People like Jim Butcher and Brandon Sanderson and Jonathan Mabry and James Artemis Owens and Dan Wells. I could keep naming them, but I'm forgetting them. But there's a ton, and if you go to that conference, you will make a lot of connections in the book industry that will last your lifetime. And so that's one of the persons I met was Kevin J. Anderson. And I went to the Superstars of Writing conference the year that my book, The Forgetting Moon, debuted. And I got to know Kevin J. Anderson, and he invited me to be part of his Wordfire Press bookstore booth at all the Comic-Cons across the country. So, I mean, I got an in to go to any Comic-Con I wanted and set up my books in Kevin J. Anderson's Wordfire Press booth and sell them, meet fans, be on panels. It's just been the Superstars of Writing conference has been the gift that keeps on giving. And Kevin J. Anderson since sold that business to Alexi Vandenberg, who now runs Bard's Tower. And they do the same thing. They get authors to every Comic-Con in the country, and we set up on the showroom floor, and we're at the booth, and we sign books. And every famous science fiction author and fantasy author you can think of has been part of this thing that Kevin J. Anderson and Alexi Vandenberg started. Now you can see me at most Comic-Cons at Bard's Tower, or at least the Comic-Cons that I get invited to and that I attend. Emerald City Comic-Con coming up March of 2020. I will be at that one. Anyway, we still haven't gotten to my review of Dune, and so let's do it. It's beautifully written. What can I say? It's got some of the best characters ever. It's the best science fiction book ever written, and I wish I would have written it. That's how good it is. I mean, after Star Wars, I think Dune is the next greatest science fiction pop culture thing. You know, I think it even ranks in my book above Star Trek and Battlestar Galactica and a lot of this stuff. Dune, I think, is where it's at. And I give it, like I said earlier, I give it a solid 10 out of 10 for the book itself. Again, if you're gonna listen to the Audible version, you're gonna miss out on about a quarter of the book because the actors act it out like it's a play, and it's ridiculous. I don't know what just fell down behind me. I think the cat had something to do with it because she's crawling along the shelf back here and jiggling things. But anyway, Dune, the book, I wish I had written it. It's got, kind of like Lord of the Rings, it's got sort of an old-timey feel to the language that Frank Herbert used. He's using sentence structure and that's a little unique. He's using some poetic language in it. If you compare this to the stuff that Kevin J. Anderson and Brian Herbert do in the sequels and prequels, their writing style is a little more workmanlike and a little more commercial. Frank Herbert's writing style is not commercial at all. And I think that that's part of the selling point of this book, is that it's you got to pay attention. You cannot kind of let your mind wander as you're reading and kind of think about if you're going to have a hamburger or a Subway sandwich for lunch. You got to pay attention, because if you don't pay attention, you're going to be lost a little bit, because there are a lot of characters, and they're all great characters. And when you read the book closely, and you get to know those characters, and those characters, starting with Paul Atreides. He is a young boy, kind of a nobleman's son, who is taken on this journey to the planet of Arrakis. It's man, I might have got that wrong. I'm sure it's the planet Arrakis, but they call it Dune. And he becomes sort of the leader of an army there, and I don't want to give away too many spoilers, so we'll stop at that description of Paul Atreides. But he becomes the Moadib, which is kind of the religious messiah to the people that live on this desert planet of Dune. And this desert planet of Dune is the only place in the universe where you can get the spice, and the spice is what powers the faster than light ships and stuff like that. And so there's a lot of intrigue built around that, and a lot of political intrigue, things like that. And the characters, we can name them off. Lady Jessica, Leto Atreides, they're Paul Atreides' parents, and everybody remembers Fade, who was played by Sting in the movie. And I don't know who's going to play him in the new movie that's coming up, but I'm excited to find out. I think it's going to be a great new movie. I thought the original movie was fine for its time. It was an average. It was average, let's be honest. It was average. It had some kind of quirky production values that were kind of cool and things like that. But, it wasn't that popular of a movie, and it's dated at this point. But then Princess Aurelian and Chani and great female characters. If you like female characters, they're not all male characters. Paul Atreides has his entourage of trainers. He's a nobleman's son, so he gets trained at everything. From the cat is still just causing trouble over here, distracting me. Paul is trained by his trainers, Stilgar and Peter and Gurney Halleck, and of course, Duncan Idaho. Who's one of the most popular characters in the book, Duncan Idaho, who's got a reoccurring role in every other Dune book. And then Kynes, I don't know how you say that, but in the movie he was played by Max von Sydow, and one of the characters in the movie that I really liked that didn't get a lot of screen time was Leah Atreides, and she was just a little kid, and the little actress that played Leah Atreides grew up and was on The Sopranos. If you've ever watched The Sopranos, she was on a couple episodes where Christopher Moltisanti was trying to become a movie producer and a scriptwriter, and he met this girl from Hollywood along with Jon Favreau. And Jon Favreau played himself, and we know that Jon Favreau is now a great movie director, but he played himself as sort of an up-and-coming movie director. And this girl, her actress was named Alicia Witt, and she was in Dune as a little kid, and then she was in Sopranos a couple episodes playing this movie director who was trying to hustle Christopher Moltisanti, the gangster, for some of Christopher's gangster stories so she could put them into her scripts. And anyway, the whole thing went sideways. Like everything on The Sopranos goes sideways, It's kind of a little bit like Dune. Everything in Dune sort of goes sideways. It's kind of like The Sopranos in outer space, to be honest with you. And it's just fantastic. I can't say enough about it. Like I said, it's the best science fiction book ever written. I can't recommend it enough. I think my review was spoiler free. I didn't want to say too much other than to just gush and gush and gush about it. It's a book. I'm an author myself. It's a book I wish I would have written. There's only a handful of books like that. Lonesome Dove, The Stand, Dune, Ender's Game. There's just a few that I wish that I had written and had reaped the royalties out of them, to be honest with you. But I cannot recommend this book enough. Please, 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 please read it, because they're going to be a new Dune movie come out soon, and I think it's going to be like The Lord of the Rings. I think it's going to be like a trilogy of Dune movies, and it's going to be awesome, and it's going to be epic like Lord of the Rings, and it's being directed by the guy that directed the second Blade Runner movie, which was a work of art. It wasn't that popular, but it was an absolute work of art, and I think that it's going to be pretty good. So, Dune, solid 10 out of 10. Please read it. Read it, 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 read it.